I don't really care about Micah Parsons' run defense, but the Green Bay Packers do need a plan to stop the Detroit Lions in Week 1.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. There's a lot of cope going on right now in the media from NFC North fans, from other NFC contender fan bases about Micah Parsons and his run defense. And let me state unequivocally, in the words of Mike Tomlin, we do not care. You do not acquire arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL, the most disruptive 26-year-old pass rusher in the NFL by far, clearly, and whinge about run defense. Is Micah Parsons a great run defender? No, he's not. That's not the point. It's like saying Deion Sanders was not a great tackler. Okay. He was also easily the best corner in the NFL and is an all-time great. And Micah Parsons is an all-time great. If you want to argue Myles Garrett is a little bit better at these couple things, fine. Okay. That's it. Myles Garrett is the only guy in Micah Parsons conversations. Okay. And I don't think there's another defensive player at any position currently in Micah Parsons conversations. Not Dexter Lawrence, not Pat Surtain. It's Myles Garrett, it's Micah Parsons. They're the best two defensive players in the sport. That being said, the Packers and Micah Parsons said in his press conference on Friday, there is a plan for him. Presumably that is going to mean modified snaps. And that is the smart way to handle Micah Parsons coming off no preseason, no training camp. Remember that study that Matt LaFleur referenced that we talked about on this show about, preseason versus not? The players who don't play in preseason are more likely to get injured. Okay, that's Micah Parsons. And it's because you can't go from very little activity to full bore 60 snaps. Now, Khalil Mack did it. But the Packers are not. And the Packers have a week 2 Thursday night. So you can ramp up, you get a little bit of a bye, and then I think by week 3, we're talking about full go. Packers have to play in the meantime. And so I would expect that means for Micah Parsons, you're talking about 3rd and longs, 2nd and longs, maybe high leverage situations, maybe early in the game. He takes fewer snaps. Later in the game, you're hoping you have him in the 4th quarter to go rush the passer if you need him, though. If the Lions are playing with the lead, they're going to be running the ball anyway. But the Packers will need a plan without Kenny Clark to stop teams like the Lions. And for non-week 1 games, I believe that will involve Micah Parsons playing linebacker. 4 true defensive line bodies, because Micah Parsons is not. He's 6'3", 245. That's not a defensive line body. And whether that's their 3-4 that they've been using, their odd front, where Micah Parsons is a stand-up outside linebacker, and you've got 3 true defensive linemen plus an edge. Because on the Packers, that other edge is Rashawn Gary, who's 275. It's Lucas Van Ness, who's 275. It's Kingsley Enagbare, who's 260, but is a strong and stout run defender. You're not going to put Brenton Cox on the other side of Micah Parsons, probably, if you want to stop the run. But on 3rd down, you might. On 2nd and long, you might. So I think structurally, the Packers have done some of the things defensively that have them prepared to incorporate Micah Parsons. They've been showing some of those four-man fronts through four true defensive linemen and then the linebacker. In the preseason, it was Isaiah Simmons a lot of times. So you can have Edge Cooper and Quay Walker on the field. You put Micah Parsons really as your fifth defensive lineman. He's walked up, and now he can either rush the passer, he can drop, he can do anything. They can do that from an odd front. They can do that from an even front. And have four bodies that helped protect Micah Parsons, so he's not one of four. What happens a lot of times in nickel, in odd front teams, so 3-4 teams, is you take the defensive lineman off the field. And now Micah Parsons has to be one of four guys to stop the run. So if the Lions want to run out of nickel, they can just come downhill at a four-man surface. That's hard work for a guy that's 245 to hold up. He's very powerful moving forward, Parsons is. He can convert speed to power because he is explosive moving forward. It is the stoutness at the point of attack because he's smaller. You can more easily move him. So I think the Packers will have to scheme around that with their personnel. And that is something Jeff Hafley did last year. 27% almost of his snaps were played out of true base personnel. 4 defensive line bodies and 3 linebackers. I think you will see them do that on early downs with Parsons as the third linebacker, not playing end, though he will be the end man on the line of scrimmage. So what do you do against the Lions? Well, you have to use the same plan you were going to use. The question is, who's going to play nose tackle? I have to believe that Nazir Stackhouse is going to be playing right away, heavy reps. My guess is they will start with that 3-4 look, where it's 3 true defensive linemen, and you'll see Devontae Wyatt, you'll see Carl Brooks, and maybe Colby Wooden could be Nazir Stackhouse with Brooks outside. I think Brooks ideally suited to be a 5 technique, given he was a defensive end at Bowling Green. They have some opportunities here, some options here. Maybe you want Nazir Stackhouse there on early downs. Maybe you want Warren Brinson out there, who's 6'5", 300, 310, with that 5 technique type body. We're gonna be finding out for the first time in Detroit. The thing is, last year, Kenny Clark was not a high-level player, in part because of the injury. And this was a top 10 running defense. I said this on the live show, which is, by the way, now our most watched show ever on YouTube. The Packers were top 10 already in passing defense, in total defense, and in rushing defense. Now, part of that was they played a significant amount of single high safety. Way more than Joe Barry did, way more than Mike Pettin did. And so you're stopping the run with personnel, with bodies, 8-man in the box. You're even more confident doing that with Micah Parsons as the season goes on, as he's playing a full load. He's not going to be able to do that week 1. So I think on early downs, you're going to see the Lions try and get to some play action stuff. Maybe try and get Jamison Williams over the top to convince the Packers, hey, you need to get 2 safeties back there. Now, I think they're going to be comfortable saying, David McKinney, Evan Williams, you guys can handle it. Edgerrin Cooper will be full go, really for the first time in a game against this Lions defense. He was at the end of last year, looked like one of the best run defending linebackers in football. This is his chance to go prove it. I think the Packers can solve this with a numbers approach. Just throw a bunch of different guys at it. They're going to have a hockey rotation up front. Rashawn Gary was one of the best run defending edge players in the NFL last year. Number 1 in ESPN's run stop win rate. Lucas Van Ness is a stout run defender. Maybe we see him playing more on the inside on early downs. I don't know how much that really helps you though, because is Van Ness going to be any more stout than say Colby Wooden or Carl Brooks? I don't see that. Van Ness is a very stout run defender on the edge. But if he's going to have to eat double teams, if the Lions are going to come downhill running duo, that's not the guy that I want taking on 2 when it's, the guard and center coming down. You want a defensive tackle body in there for that. You want Nazir Stackhouse in that, or Warren Brinson in there for that. Carl Brooks played nose tackle last year. Colby Wooden played some nose tackle last year, even though he's, 305 pounds. The Packers are going to try and keep their linebackers clean to make those plays and live with not having their defensive linemen knifing in there. Maybe they take more risks. Maybe they say, Devontae Wyatt, you try and shoot some more gaps. And hope that if there is a leak that the safeties can come in and fill and take care of it. But I would guess the Packers' approach the second time they play the Lions will look markedly different than it will the first time they play the Lions. Now, how would this offseason have looked different, if at all, had the Packers known they were going to make this move? Are there things that they wouldn't have done or that they feel like maybe they should have done? We'll play the hindsight game next on Locked On Packers. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. GameTime is fast and easy to use with the GameTime guarantee backing you up. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you pay is the price you see. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready to kick off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Right now, the Packers, you can get over 11.5 wins at plus 175. If you think they're going to win 12 games, plus 175. Now, would I like it a little bit more if that was 3-1? Well, you think they're going to win 13 games this year, plus 330 to hit it at 12.5. I might take that. I might have to pause the podcast recording and go take that. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. As I looked back at this offseason, because there was some discussion on Packers Twitter about, okay, would there have been a way that they would have handled the draft in particular differently? But my first thought had nothing to do with the draft. My first thought was, if you knew you were moving on from Kenny Clark and you knew you were getting Micah Parsons, you find a way to keep TJ Slaton. And I think they saw TJ Slaton as replaceable. A 27-year-old going to be 28 in October. 330-pound defensive tackle. That would have been the place to start. I mean, I think that they made the right decision at the time for them in moving on, believing, I think rightly, they could find a player in the draft on day 3 or 2 who could give you that production. And if you can't, you have Kenny Clark right there. And I think the plan was Kenny Clark first, and then a developmental player on day 3. In this case, Nazir Stackhouse is the 1-for-1 TJ Slaton replacement and is literally wearing TJ Slaton's old number. So if you hadn't kept TJ Slaton, because look, he got real money from the Cincinnati Bengals. He got a 2-year, $14 million deal. That's $7 million. The Packers would have been hard pressed financially. They would have had to move some things around to make this all work. Now they saved money moving on from Kenny Clark, but they would have had to, probably moved on from Kenny Clark at the time. Like if you make this trade before the draft, by the way, you probably have to pay more than the Packers ultimately paid, which is why the Cowboys royally botched this situation. But TJ Slaton, to me, is where you would start. You would have kept TJ Slaton. Hopefully he would have stayed. Maybe you could have gotten him for 2 years, $5 million a year instead of $14 million a year, and you would have done it ahead of time, right? Like you would have done it before free agency started. But the reason they didn't is because they were comfortable letting him walk, knowing they had Kenny Clark, and then you can throw some day 3 assets at it. Now, I'm not convinced that the Packers would have done much better in the draft finding nose tackles than they did with Nazir Stackhouse, who was a draftable player by consensus. Now you go back and you look at the draft and you see, okay, where were the opportunities potentially for them? And when I look at their class, I think, they would do the Matthew Golden pick 10 times out of 10. They would do that again and have absolutely no problem doing that one again. Now, I'd seen some people say, Anthony Belton, maybe they would have used a second round pick. There were a bunch of guys that went in the second round. Well, they see value in getting ahead of the Rasheed Walker future. Now, maybe that changes. Micah Parsons, they're buddies. In the second round, there were real, true difference makers at defensive line. When the Packers took Anthony Belton, there were players like Omar Norman Lott, who's a defensive tackle. Shamar Turner certainly would have been someone that I would have had interest in that ended up going to the Chicago Bears. But Shamar Turner is a 3-tech. He's 6'3", 290. Omar Norman Lott is an undersized 3-tech, 6'2", 291. They're not Packers types. Some of these defensive tackles, the big guys, came off the board a little bit sooner. Now, there were other players that the Packers could have taken. Darius Alexander, but again, not a nose tackle. Vernon Broughton. There was Jamari Caldwell went right ahead of the Packers when they drafted Savion Williams. Jamari Caldwell is a nose tackle type. But that was my thought, was Savion Williams is your luxury pick there. You don't need Savion Williams. Savion Williams is a luxury. The thing is there were not a lot of players in that spot where you go, yeah, we're getting better value here for the Packers. Deion Walker goes at pick 109. Ty Robinson goes at pick 111. CJ West goes at pick 113. Now, CJ West would have been one of those guys that in the third round, I would have been comfortable with in the third round there. Maybe you say, okay, Barron Sorrell, instead of taking Barron Sorrell, package a pick at 124, package one of those picks, and after you draft Savion Williams, move up to get a CJ West. But then you're using extra draft capital to take a nose tackle? I don't know that I want to do that. And the guys that you could have taken instead of Barron Sorrell are not nose tackle types. Tonka Hemingway went at 140, he went at 136. Joshua Farmer went at 137. Joshua Farmer, not a nose tackle. Cam Jackson from Florida, that's a big boy, but that's pick 140. Like, the NFL did not see the value with him until much later. Jordan Phillips from Maryland, I think that could have been an opportunity there. But again, 143, that's much later. So maybe they would have taken one of the players that they already took earlier than they took them. I guess all of that is to say, I look at this and I don't know that the draft played out in a way that the Packers should go, man, we really missed an opportunity knowing you got Micah Parsons. I don't think the hindsight game in this case is particularly useful, or at least it's not the result of saying they botched this somehow. I don't think there was some missed opportunity, in part because I was the one on this show going, wait until day 3. That was when Kenny Clark was on the roster, and we knew TJ Slaton was out the door. And we were pretty sure that Kenny Clark was probably only going to be on this roster for one more season. If you're going to find that nose tackle, day 3 is the time to do it. And they did that. And they found Warren Brinson, a player who, if they're going to play some of this more odd front stuff, fits what they want to do. I was not super excited about the Brinson pick. But now, given what we know about the way their front is going to play and given the way that he played, it's hard not to be excited about what he can give them. Remember, this was a guy who was playing with the first team defense against the Seahawks in joint practices against the ones, against Sam Darnold. When Evan Williams ended that joint practice with an interception, Brinson absolutely ragdolled the Seahawks left tackle and got into Sam Darnold's face to affect that throw. Even in joint practices, got in Sam Darnold's face to affect that throw. So there's some ability there. I really like those two players. But you'd like to have someone who is a proven run stopper. Now, you have a terrific run defending linebacker in Edgerrin Cooper and two very good run defending edge players. The question is going to be up the middle. Can they absorb blocks? Can they eat blocks? Or are they going to get moved off their spots? Are teams just going to come downhill, run power, run gap scheme stuff against them just because they think these defensive linemen cannot hold up? They're going to find out week one. They're going to find out week one because the Lions, if someone's going to test you, it's going to be this Lions team. Now, we don't know without Ben Johnson what this offense is going to look like. I assume pretty much the same. And this is a team very willing. When you get in nickel, when you get in sub package on 2nd and 12 even, they'll run the ball. And they'll run the ball twice because they'll pick up 4. And now it's 4th and 4. And in plus territory, they'll just go for it. They might run the ball again. So the Lions, it's in some ways, it's a tough team to start with, especially when you don't have Micah Parsons at full go. Because if you did, then you could count on maybe a splash play here in the run game. You know, you get into a 3rd down situation and now you can create some negatives or early down pass rush. I'm trying to remember who shared the graph. I think it was Ben Solak from ESPN, formerly of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. That early down pressures over the last handful of seasons, Micah Parsons like way above everyone else. So if you want to do the thing that a lot of teams tried to do last year, throw on early downs, because the Packers like to play base. Well, Micah Parsons is the equalizer for that. Because he's going to get after your offensive tackle. And he's played well against the Lions in the past. I understand people want to say, but the run defense, he's been disruptive against the Lions. Mostly because Taylor Decker cannot handle him. Most tackles cannot handle him. Now, we're a couple days removed. Where is the betting public on the Packers? We talked about where we thought he stood. This team stood with him on it. But where does the public think the Packers stand in the NFC hierarchy? Let's talk about that next on Locked On Packers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. But if you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time. It's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league, Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better. With kickoff September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your draft now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether it's 401k, properties, or investments, when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you so you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet, thank God. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. The Packers had been at 9.5 with their win total. So the betting markets view them as between a 9 and 10 win team, somewhere in there. That had been where it was. Now, you have to lay significant juice to get over 9.5. You got to minus 160 is real juice on the over. But what's interesting is it's still plus odds to take over 10.5. So Micah Parsons did not move the needle 2 full wins for Green Bay. That's interesting. That's interesting. I would think he's worth at least a win. And that's kind of where the odds makers see it. Our friends at FanDuel have the under 10.5 still at -125. You still got juice on the under. So that means right now the betting markets are saying the Packers are a 10-win team. Clearly over 9.5, but clearly under 10.5. 10-7 would be a disappointment. And I don't understand it. The Packers were 11-6 last year with a hurt Jordan Love and no Micah Parsons. So make that one make sense for me. Okay. I mean, look, you want to have some money. That might be a good place to allocate some of that money. I mentioned on our live show, the Packers now -2.5 at home against the Detroit Lions. Remember, home field advantage now worth 1.5, not 3. That was the tradition for a long time. But the Packers -142 on the money line. It's not that different. It's not so different. They were -1.5. I would have thought Micah Parsons was worth more than a point on the line. But I think what that is building in is you're not going to get a ton of Micah Parsons in this game. People have pointed out that the Packers have been the favorites now for a while. I don't understand quite what happened there. On FanDuel, at least, the Lions opened as the favorites. They were 1.5 point favorites when this line opened in May. And in June, it changed. And nothing changed between May and June, I guess, except some reports that Matthew Golden looked really good. But that's enough to move the line 3 points across the zero? That seems strange. But I think that shows you the momentum for the Packers had already been building. Now, the Packers are still favorites to win the NFC North. Not still, but have since Friday when we checked them or when we did our live show, +170 to win the NFC North. I think I bet them at +330, something like that. No, maybe it was less than that. Maybe it was +270. The Lions are +185. What's interesting is, yes, the Packers are now the favorites to win the division, but they do not have shorter odds than the Lions to win the NFC. You're going to bet the Packers to win the NFC. You're going to bet 6.5 to 1 +650. The Lions are 6 to 1. So just slightly better. And the Eagles up there +360. The Eagles still clearly viewed in the eyes of the betting public anyway, as the favorite in the NFC. And you want to look at the Super Bowl, those differences are even more between the Lions and the Packers. The Lions are 11 to 1. The Packers are 13 to 1, but there is now much more distance between the 49ers and everyone else. So the Packers are 13 to 1, but now the 49ers 18 to 1, the Rams 19 to 1, the Commanders 20 to 1, the Bengals 20 to 1, Broncos 22 to 1. The Packers much more in that inner circle, the true inner circle of contenders according to the odds makers. The Ravens at 7 to 1, the Eagles at 7 to 1, the Bills and the Chiefs +750 +850. And there's a little bit of a gap. Lions at 11 to 1, Packers at 13 to 1. So Green Bay still sort of seen as a fringe contender, though much closer to the NFC contender range than they had been. They're now +650. I mentioned they were more like 9 to 1 as recently as Wednesday. In fact, I posted a story or a piece on social where the Packers, 49ers, Rams, and Commanders were all like between 9 and 10 to 1. Tampa, I think, they've gone down. I think they were at like 11 to 1. The Vikings at 13 to 1. The Bears odds have somehow shortened for some reason. They were at 20 to 1 or 25 to 1 even. They're now at 18 to 1. Not sure why. But I think this is an opportunity. If you're into placing a wager, I think the Packers are undervalued because I do think they are the favorites. They should be the favorites. You think Micah Parsons is afraid to go against Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson? He knows those guys. He's been disruptive in those games. And so I think there's real opportunity here to still find value in the Packers if you believe in them the way that I do. Now, you're not getting the same value you would be if you made these moves a couple weeks ago. I think I have the Packers at 22 or 25 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. Now, you're going to get much shorter odds, but I still think they're undervalued relative to where they should be. 6.5 to 1 to win the NFC. I mean, I like that. I like that a lot. Of the teams that are most likely to win the division in either division, the AFC, I feel like, is much tougher with the Ravens and the Bills and the Chiefs. The Eagles are one injury away from like clearly being worse than the Packers. Like if AJ Brown is hurt, or Saquon Barkley gets hurt, or Jordan Mailata gets hurt, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, one of those guys gets hurt. It's a big problem for the Packers. It's not. We've talked about that. They are pretty injury proof. So I still like value in what's going on with Green Bay. All right, I hope you enjoyed your Labor Day or are enjoying your Labor Day. We'll be back on Tuesday as we get you set for everything week 1. We've got some great interviews coming this week. Bob Sturm from Dallas Radio is going to join us. Cody Alexander from Match Quarters is going to join us to talk about deploying Micah Parsons. Lily Zhao is going to join us. Matt Derry is going to join us. We have a loaded week as we get you ready for week 1. Packers, Lions. Follow me on the social medias. Follow the podcast on the social medias. Subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts. Leave a rating and review. It really helps other people find us. The same is true on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. Help people find us because we have fun here. And other people should want to have fun too, right? So follow me, follow the podcast, and we'll be live after the game on the Locked On Packers YouTube feed, and then right into the squad show. Me, Jeff Jagosinski, Brandon Snide. We're going to give you an hour extra post-game. It's bonus content here every post-game show this year, plus Wednesdays at 7:15 Central Time, so you can stay Locked On Packers.